This amazing person here drove down from Edmonton this morning to come and see you guys, which is incredible. I've known Courtney for quite a while now on Instagram. It's the first time we've met in person, which is fun. She is unbelievably talented as an artist, painter. We always joke that I should make it and she should paint it, and we would rule the world. Yeah, incredible. So I'm really excited to hear Courtney do her talk about mini painting. Again, if you guys have any questions or anything, please check somebody with an orange lanyard, and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Hi. My name is Courtney, and I am from Figuratively Speaking Minis. I'm from Edmonton, like Sean said. And I just wanted to thank him for this great opportunity to come down. This is kind of my dream to be a part of something like this, and I'm just so happy that I even just get to be a part of something like this. I work in Edmonton. I primarily teach in Edmonton. I teach beginner, intermediate, busts. I also teach bases and building dioramas. So that's kind of what I do. I've been doing this for now 5 years. This year it's my anniversary of hobbying in October, and I absolutely love it. I adore this hobby for so many reasons, and that's why I'm just incredibly happy to be here and be a part of it, because within this hobby, we all kind of hunker down in our basements and we do it on our own. So to come together as a group of people with common interests in the same room is kind of amazing, and we can share how much we love it together. And then we get to share tips and tricks, and oh my gosh, I didn't know you could do that with EVA foam. And you're like, have you tried it with silicone? Like, how great is that? To also be able to collaborate with others. So yeah, thanks, Sean. You're awesome. And everybody else here who made it out. So like I said, I've been painting for 5 years now. The community is getting bigger and bigger. When I first started, I just wanted to kind of do something in my spare time. I had a lot of it. I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was a little bored. So I kind of dove into painting with board game figures. And then a buddy of mine was like, did you know you can do this with Dungeons and Dragons figures? And I said, absolutely, like, give me all the things. And I went on Instagram to try and find more like-minded people, and I found them. And they not only helped me improve my craft, they helped inspire me to teach. So about a year into my mini painting journey, I guess you could call it, I decided to teach, but I was actually approached. Could you teach a beginner class? And at that point I was like, sure, I can teach people how to just, base paint a figure. I have a little bit of skill. I can do that. So I went to my local tabletop cafe, and I began to teach. And there's nothing, I think, more satisfying than teaching beginner painters. And that is the class that I am most proud to put on. I'm actually teaching at AärdCON here in Calgary next weekend. I will be teaching, thank you, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, beginner and intermediate classes. But beginner is kind of where my heart is at, because you get people who come into your space, they're like, what do I do with this? And you're like, this is the best hobby ever. Let me explain why, because there's no wrong way to do it. So if anything, after I finish speaking, if you kind of feel inspired that you want to go teach someone else, I know there's a lot of experienced hobbyists, painters, builders, crafters in this room. I implore you to teach someone else. Teach, and if it's your spouse, if it's your partner, if it's your child, if it's the neighborhood kid that just kind of dines and or rings and dashes or whatever, just be like, come paint minis. Not in a creepy way, but invite them into this space, because it is a great space. It's great for your mental health. It's great for expressing yourself. It's great for being a part of a community. So my beginner class is very accessible. I do not critique in my beginner classes. The goal of a beginner class is to inspire people to want to continue. You want people to want to come to your next class. You want people to want to buy the miniature off the shelf, buy the beginner set of paint, and buy the brushes. My shtick is, it needs to be on a budget. We can go so crazy with hobby supplies, okay? And disclaimer, this is just my opinion. So, my opinions are, you can do this on a budget, okay? What's a budget? I know, right? But when I have a beginner class, I tell them, you are here to learn first, buy the good, cool stuff later. That's not a necessity to be a part of this. So my beginners come in, I rip open their WizKid pre-primed miniatures. That's a really great place to start. WizKids, they come primed out of the box for the most part. There's a few other products that they have that's not primed. So what we do is we talk about, where do we get figures? We get figures at hobby stores like the Century Box, like the D20 or the the D20 Cafe, Tabletop Cafe, yeah. D6, thank you. So we like hobby stores have the figures available. If you want to go a different route, there are 3D printers. They're on Etsy. They usually do a resin print, a high cast resin print. They do filament. Every medium is going to be a little bit different, and you have to treat it a little bit different. For example, resin needs to be washed. It has a mold release on it, and that mold release will not allow paint to adhere. So what we need to do is we need to wash those figures. Board game figures, such as like Zombicide, those need to be washed as well. And then you have, your WizKids, like I said, they come primed out of the box. You don't need to wash those. Those are ready to go. And then you have things like Reaper bones and Reaper miniatures. You have metal miniatures. And I talk about, in my beginner class, all of the different ways to treat those mediums. I personally do not like metal miniatures, so I never use them. But there is well, they're not great, let's just be honest. They're a little muddled in their details. I like crisp details. But you treat those miniatures differently than you would plastic. Then there's miniatures that come on a sprue, such as Frameworks or Warhammer. And those ones are you guys okay? You good? Is this yours too? Oh, sounds good. Okay. So you treat those miniatures differently. With the miniatures on the sprue, you can use plastic cement instead of super glue. So in a hobbyist arsenal, when you are building up your container of goodies, start with a miniature that's pre-primed. It's going to be your best friend. That's the best way to go. They're fairly cheap. They're mid-market. It's a good place to start. The second thing I tell beginners in my class is when it comes to paint. Now this is kind of where things get a little bit like, you're going to have to buy a lot of different kinds of paints to figure out which ones you like. But can you paint with dollar store paints? Yes, you can. It takes a little bit of effort, it takes a little bit more manipulation, but it can be done. You can go to Michael's, you can get a budget set of craft paints, and you can paint with them. And there's nothing wrong with starting your miniature painting journey with those paints. Are they the best for pigments? No. But if you kind of are on the fence of, hey, I don't really know if I like this, that's a good place to start. As the community is getting bigger and companies are embracing more of the beginner painters, you're going to find speed paints, like Army Painter speed paints, Citadel speed paints. There's Vallejo. There's a whole bunch of different brands that cater to that crowd that just want to see color on a figure. And those are great. Those are a really great place to start as well. Now for the for the people who, oh, you're making me lose my train of thought. Oh, Sean, you're distracting me. So for the people who want to have quick paint on a miniature, if you have a lot to paint really fast, yeah, I totally recommend a speed paint. There are different brands such as Vallejo, Model Colors by Vallejo, Pro Acryl, there's Army Paints, there's AK Interactive, there's Chimera, and you're going to find your budget being stretched The more niche the paint is, the better the pigment, the more you're going to be spending on a bottle of paint. They also come in different finishes. If you want a very matte paint, which as a miniature painter you would most likely want a matte paint versus a glossy paint. Glossy is more used for effects such as eyeballs and tongues and water. You want like a satin paint for basically everything. You want a matte paint for most everything as well. But that's going to be what you discover as you paint your miniatures. You're going to discover what you like the best. I have a beautiful satin set of paint, and it's great, but I love ultra matte paint. Hey, what's up?
I'm good. Can you switch the mic?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, everybody. We're going to try and put a better sound system in, so go ahead, Dave.
Because it's louder. Is that better? Is that okay? Okay. So as you continue in your miniature painting journey, you're going to buy a different paint here and there, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You should, in fact, dabble with different paints and the mediums that come along with those paints. For example, Vallejo has a thinner medium, there's a glaze medium, there's a retarder medium. They all do different things, and they're really, really great for techniques that require a longer drying time. For example, if you're doing a wet blend, you need something that allows the, you shake your head, wet blend. Wet blends are my forte, I love a wet blend. But you need a lot of time to work with that paint to blend it in together. So using those mediums are beginner friendly, and you should use them. And as you get more and more knowledge, also YouTube's your friend, you guys. Watch all the YouTube tutorials. I think I've watched hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of YouTube tutorials. And you're gonna find some really great nuggets of information in there. Write it down and watch it over and over and over again. There's nothing wrong with that. So you're gonna discover which paints you like the best. You're gonna discover what kind of finish that you like the best. And then you're going to kind of dive into the world of paintbrushes, because there's a lot of those too. Now, for paintbrushes, I like Amazon bulk. I buy bulk brushes from Amazon. Synthetic brushes are great. Real hair brushes are controversial for the reasons that they do come from an animal. That's going to be up to your moral dilemma, what you want to do in the world. But they each have their own properties that contribute to miniature painting. For example, real hair, the water and the paint can flow very nicely off of them. They tend not to break down as easily because you are washing and conditioning them. Yes, you do, like hair, have to wash and condition your brushes. As well as synthetic, the right type of synthetic brush can hold paint really, really nicely. The flow off the brush is great. Now, do you need to go spend $50 on a single paintbrush? No, you do not. Will it make you a better painter? No, it will not. It is not the tool that makes you a better painter. It is you, and it is your practice that make you the best painter. You can use a Q-tip for all I care and make something absolutely beautiful. It's great. So, yeah, like you will see some of the professionals using Winsor & Newton, Rosemary & Co. Those are very expensive brushes. There's some from the UK called Broken Toad. I use them, they're excellent, but they're also very expensive. But I also use my bulk brushes from Amazon, and I use them more often. Actually, you know what the best set of brushes that I've ever found? Dungeons & Dragons by Army Painter. The set of 3 brushes. They come with a base brush, a detail brush, and a dry brush. For $16, that is the best paintbrush set I've ever purchased. I have those brushes 4 years later, and I'm pretty hard on brushes, and they've held up. So I would recommend those brushes for beginners. Citadel has brushes, the Games Workshop brushes. Army Painter has their own set of brushes. If you are heavy-handed and push down hard, you will go through brushes much more quickly. But if you learn brush control, that is the next beginner tip, brush control. If you want to save your brushes and really elongate their life, you're going to have to learn how to manipulate your brush properly. We are not in Harry Potter. We do not paint like this. we choke up on the brush and treat it like a pencil. You want the ultimate control on your brush. You want to dictate where that paint is going on your miniature. And you want to, like I said, shampoo and condition your brush, even if it's synthetic. There are brush soaps out there, but you know what? You can actually just use shampoo and conditioner. Surprise, surprise. That is your hot tip of the day. You can use conditioners and shampoos. You need to treat your brushes with care. You're not going to be leaving it in your cup, brush bristles down. You want to maintain the tip of the bristle. A sharp tip and a fat body, that's what we like. It's a good way to go. You want something that holds the paint in and distributes it where you want it. The sharper the tip, the more precision that you're going to get. So, brushes, there's a lot of them. Paint, there's a lot of them. You're going to have to experiment with them. But you can start off cheap. $16 for a set of 3 is not bad. You can go to the dollar store and get a synthetic brush. They're not bad. They can do the job. And as you continue learning and investing your time, then you invest your money into tools, kind of thing, okay? The next thing I like to tell my beginners is there's a lot of accessories out there, and this beautiful table over here has some like gorgeous accessories. You can see that they have beautiful paint, stackable little stairs so you can see what you're painting. There's wet palettes. This is a travel wet palette because who doesn't like to travel and paint miniatures, right? As long as you don't break them. Luckily, I didn't break a single miniature I brought. And I drove from Edmonton and I'm a crazy driver, so. This is a really nice palette. This is a wet palette and travels. All wet palettes are a sponge and parchment paper, okay? You can go to the dollar store and get a container and a sponge and some parchment paper for under $5, okay? A palette like this is gonna run you $25. And they're only gonna get more expensive because then there's like everlasting palettes, then there's ones with like elastic and there's microband and all that kind of stuff. Yes, wet palettes can mold, be aware of that. So you can go to your dollar store, you can go get a sponge, get your parchment paper, cut it to size and use it. In fact, when I teach my beginner classes, all I do is put a wet paper towel on the bottom. Saturated wet paper towel, a piece of parchment paper on top, and that lasts my classes run about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and that lasts the whole time. And then you chuck it, and you're good to go. It doesn't need to be expensive to have a wet palette, but I think, in my opinion, they are essential to beginners. If you are a beginner painter, you need to have a wet palette of some kind. It's going to elongate the life of your paint as you're painting. If you use a plastic disc, that paint is drying in 5 minutes, and then you're wasting paint. Now it's drying on your palette. You can't resaturate it. You can't bring it back to life. Okay? Use a wet palette if you are a beginner. It doesn't have to be expensive. The next thing that we hobbyists like to use are handles, painting handles. A painting handle is absolutely essential, in my opinion, to painting miniatures, because when you are holding your figure in your hands, your fingers are getting in the way. The oils from your hands are touching the figure, and the oils can transfer onto your miniature and do that thing where you try and like paint a little stroke on it and it spider webs out. It's like allergic to the paint. You just keep, and it will not stick. The most frustrating thing of my life. So, we do not touch the miniature with our oily hands. I do like to eat snacks while I miniature paint. I have a lot of drawer snacks. And so if you're eating, use a handle when you paint, and it will save your miniature. This is a fancy handle. There are many fancy handles. Again, this beautiful table has beautiful handles. Some of them are from Citadel. They have little spring-loaded mechanisms that hug the bottom of the miniature, so you can tip it upside down, you can manipulate it, you can get all of those hard-to-reach angles with a handle. We want handles. There are very small details underneath the miniature, like for example, behind a cloak. On a 28mm figure, if you're trying to get a kneecap under a cloak, you gotta get the right angle because, you know, you gotta manipulate your figure. Can you use a cork? Yep. Who drinks wine? Use a cork. There you go. Not that anybody uses a film camera these days, but a film canister, a shot glass. I use a lot of shot glasses or mason jars for larger figures. It doesn't have to be a fancy handle. You're looking at $15 to $20 for a handle. You don't need them. Just anything that fits comfortably in your hand. Also, if you work construction, if you do any outside work or any intense work with your hands, you might not have a lot of strength. Your hand will fatigue quite quickly if you're just holding your miniature. But in a handle, you'll get more longevity out of your paint session because you're comfortable. Your hand's not straining to hold something, right? So we like handles. Do they have to be expensive? No, they don't. Use what you have in your house. I used a mason jar for years, and then I'm like, maybe I should get a Citadel one. I never use it. Or a piece of wood, that works too. Now, there are other hobby things that we need to be aware of. So when we have our beautiful figures, we bought one from Century Box. It's primed out of the box. We open it up, we're ready to paint. We've got our brushes, we've got our paint, we've got our palette. Also, just use a normal water cup. It doesn't have to be fancy. There's like water cup, just use a cup. It's a cup, just a cup, okay? There are one more thing that we need to do before we get to start painting, and that's prepping the model. Now, it's one more thing, but it's actually a multitude of steps. If your model does not come out of the box primed, you need to prime it after you wash it. What primers do we use? There's so many primers out there. This is entirely up to you. Budget friendly, go to Home Depot. You're looking at $9 a can. Yes, it's Rust-Oleum. Yes, it works. Yes, you can use a rattle can in minus 40-degree weather. I've done it. It's possible, okay? You spray your miniature, you get it all primed and ready to go. If you have an airbrush, you can use an airbrush. If you want to paint on primer, paint on primer. Just make sure that your miniature is in good shape so that your paint will adhere to it. That's the point of primer. There is a technique called zenithal priming where it gives you a better kind of look at the highlights and shadows of your miniature, where you prime it black and then you shoot white from up top. It's just to simulate where the light is going to hit the miniature. It's not necessary, but it could help, and especially if you're doing more techniques such as glazing or speed painting with those speed paints or contrast paints. Zenithal priming is going to be your friend. It's going to look crisp faster if you use a zenithal prime. You also need to remove the flashing, which is extra pieces of plastic, off your miniature. And the way to do that is with knives. You can buy a hobby knife, or my favorite thing is bulk off Amazon. I know that there's a lot of people who don't like Amazon, so now I'm just like, I buy a lot of stuff on Amazon. But these little hobby X-Acto knives are great, and like, you know, these hobby knives are great too. You're gonna remove the mold lines, and those are where the mold came together and it creates like a ridge. You wanna smooth that out, because what's gonna happen is paint is going to collect along that ridge, and it's like ask me if I've removed mold lines every single time. Absolutely not. Like, no, like I don't have time for that. Like, so that's up to your discretion, how you want your model to look in the end. Maybe you'll remove the mold lines, maybe you won't. Maybe you'll be happy with it, maybe you won't, but now you'll know for next time. Then there's one more step. You have to make sure you kind of just look at your model. Has there been a bubble that formed during the molding process? And sometimes there's the bubbles that do form make little divots and stuff like that. Or if you build a model, for example, like Warhammer, and you squeeze the pieces together, they like fit, they have little peg and sockets, there might be a gap. We fill in the gaps. Ask me again if I fill in every single gap. No, I don't. But the paint will fall off. It will make it look not as clean as if you did fill in the gap. There are gap fillers that are creams, like this one. This one's Plastic Putty by Vallejo. There's 2-part epoxies, there's green stuff, there's a multitude of different mediums that you could use to fill in gaps. And it's just a way that you can make your miniature look a little less hodgepodged together. Like, it just looks cleaner, it looks more professional. Not necessary. If you're a beginner and you're like, nope, I don't want to do that, then don't do it. Don't do it. Just start painting. And that's the point. Now we're going to paint. Your model is bought, primed, prepped, and you've got your brush, you've got your wet palette, and you chose what paints that you want. Fantastic. And now you're like, well, now what do I do? How do I make this at least look good on a tabletop? There's no wrong way to do this, but there are tips and tricks to make your life easier. And that's why in my classes, I don't critique. I don't say, well, you did this wrong, because there's no wrong way to do it. If you want to paint your miniature all pink and then paint it red on just the scarf, and then you want to paint the boots blue, that's totally fine. That's your process, and that's going to make you the most happy. Then do that. And there's no wrong way to do that. But if you want some tips and tricks, it's going to be, you're going to paint the hard to reach areas first. You're going to paint behind the cloak, because if you make that front look real good and you forgot to paint the behind the cloak, now you most likely will smudgy the paint on the nice part that you finished. Paint the harder to reach spots first. That's tipping dragons upside down and painting their belly. That's, painting swords on the side. If you want a metallic looking sword, paint that first. And then paint everything else as colorful as you want. You're going to want to not put so much pressure on what colors look good together as a beginner. Don't worry about color theory. Don't worry about that yet. If your miniature is all brown and gray, congratulations. You just made your first miniature, and you're gonna play it in your game, and it's gonna look great. But the next time you paint it, you might say, well, how can I improve this? How can I make it look less neutral? Okay, here's your tips and tricks. Look at a color wheel. Look at what colors are opposite of each other. Well, I'm from Edmonton, so look at the Oilers, okay? Look at their jerseys. They're orange and blue for a reason, right? I mean, gosh, every Marvel movie, everything's orange and blue these days. But those colors are opposite for a reason. They're eye-catching. So if you want an eye-catching figure, now you're looking at the color wheel. You're looking at colors. You're looking at what colors match, what go together, Do you know? Oh, okay. Well, good. I'm just about done. So those tips and tricks, those little things like that are what I teach in my beginner class. And again, I know there's a lot of experienced hobbyists here. I implore you, if you have ever put paint on a miniature, teach someone else, because you can do it. You've done it. That's all that there needs to be, and that's all that you need to know for now. And then you sign up for an intermediate class, and then we take it from there. Okay? So don't be intimidated by a brush and paint. It is accessible. It is budget friendly. I highly suggest that you go out, look at all the products, compare them, buy yourself what you think that you'll need, and swap with people and talk to people about it, and just keep going. And thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for letting me talk about miniature painting, because I love it so much. And I hope that you go out there, find a class, be a part of it. You'll find some really cool people. And you know what? Cheers. Happy hobbying, everybody. I'm really happy that you're here. I'm running away. I'm not.
Hey, everybody. like once again, big thanks to Courtney. How amazing was that, right? Fountain of knowledge. Courtney, we want to say thank you very much.
Oh.
The folks from Fenris, you know what they gave you?
What?
A paint.
Oh, okay.
Look at that.
This is a really good matte paint. This is my favorite, okay? So it's not satin, it's matte, so it doesn't blend easily. There's your hot tip, but great paint, love this paint.
So big thank you to Fenris who helped support the show. They gave us a bunch of amazing stuff. You get a nice little mug. And you also, PM Hobbycraft, I don't know if you've ever been there here in Calgary. They're like a warehouse. It's about 5 times the size of this room, and it's just full of hobby crafting stuff. Okay?
I'm a hoarder as well, so don't do that either.
Okay,